You might say. Even the little ones are interested in this. This, and this form blocks of information to address our conversation from John 21. So, if you get one of these, you've got the other two. I'll just tell you that because it's synoptics and it's all talking about the same thing. So, what's this first block talking about? We'll call it number one. How about that? Can't see it, but it is a number one. What's that talking about? Jesus and Peter's conversation about his impending denial. And so, putting all that together, we find out that Jesus, I think it's in Matthew, starts off by saying that Satan has wanted to sift him. But that Jesus has pleaded his case, and that when he turns around, when he gets past his denying, he's going to want him to strengthen the brethren. So keep that in mind, that Jesus has something for him to do, but he's got to work through this denial thing that is going to come up. Now, when Simon Peter is told that he is going to deny Jesus, what is his response? No. In fact, he's very strong, and I think he's sincere. I really think he's sincere about how he will not. You're coming for me. You got me a black marker. You're the man. Where were you 15 minutes ago? But thank you. I'm going to put it in my pocket. It will never see the board. I'm going to etch my name onto it and put a lock on the cap. So he just, in fact, I'm thinking, he said, what? Of course I wouldn't do that. He says, here's another thing he says that I'm sure endures him to everybody else. Even if these others do, I won't. Now they kind of start talking after that, and well, they're not going to either. But one of the things Jesus says that addresses all of them, not just Simon Peter, is when the shepherd is struck, what's going to happen to the sheep? Scatter. And so it's not just Simon Peter. He later deals with all of them, but here he's zeroing in on Simon Peter. And he tells him that Satan has a special interest in him to just really mess with him, and Jesus is prevailing on his behalf because he's got stuff for him to do in the kingdom, and but he's got to go through some things. He's got to repent and turn around from where he's going to be going. So he says, I will not do it. He says, even if I have to die, I won't do that. And I think he absolutely, positively meant that. Now, we have a situation that I think shows that he absolutely, positively meant that. Didn't put it on the board because we got to have some free stuff along the way. When they come to arrest Jesus, does Simon Peter immediately run off? No. What does he do? Draws his sword. So you remember the conversation they had when Jesus is telling them they're going to need to take stuff with them. The limited commission says, no, you depend on other folks. But in the Great Commission, you're going to need to take care of yourself. And it said, I've got 2 swords in there. That's enough. Well, it appears that Jesus wasn't wanting them to use their swords to fight to save him, because what does he do? He takes it away. He takes a shot at a guy, not very good, fortunately for the guy, and cuts off his ear. Right. Says a whole lot right there about Simon Peter and swordplay. But and Jesus fixes him up, disarms him, if you will, and later in the conversation with Pilate, this kind of thing is going to come up, and he says that my kingdom is not what? Of this world. He said, if it were, what? My servants would fight that I might not be turned over. So he could have pursued that. Not only could have called 10,000 angels, but he could have gotten some Jewish people together that would have fought for him and tried to keep him from getting in the situation that he got in. So all that's kind of going on. So he tells Simon Peter, you're going to deny him. In fact, he doesn't just tell him he's going to deny him. He tells him, if we put everything together, he's going to deny him how many times? 3. How many times? Okay, so let's, next thing here. What are we talking about in these here? It's kind of semi-obvious, but. Okay, he predicted he would deny him. Pa-pum. He's going to deny him there. Okay? And it's kind of sad. He's this apparently big, rugged fisherman guy, got a reputation for being a big, rugged fisherman guy. And after he scatters, he kind of sneaks around. Apparently John is friends with the priests, and he can get in where the priest gate thing is, he gets in. But he's not just boldly marching in. He's just kind of lingering back to the side. And one of the times, he's around this little charcoal fire trying to get warm, I guess. And a servant girl comes up to him and basically says, you're one of them. In fact, what is it about him that betrays him to the Judean crowd that he must be one of Jesus' people? Well, he speaks like a Galilean. And so every one of Jesus' disciples, apostles, was a Galilean except one. Which one was that, by the way? Judas. So he never pick a Judean for an apostle. Stick with your Galileans. So he has, and he gets progressively worked up, does he not? When people are asking him if he's not one of them, and we know you're one of them, and this and that. And finally, he does what we would interpret one way, but we need to understand what's going on back there, with oaths and curse. It didn't mean he used foul language. He's basically calling down curses on him if he is really one of his followers. Let terrible things happen to me. And he's taking oaths too, which means he would be really blaspheming in many ways to take an oath that he wasn't him. He's lying no matter what. So we got all this going on. So let's pick out some things here to bring forward with us. Thing number 1, he says, I will not deny you. And in association with that, he says, these other folks might, but I won't. Jesus tells him that he will, and 3 times. In fact, 3 times he does it. In fact, when we get Luke involved in this, we find an interesting thing. As Jesus is going through his mock trials, and they're parading him around from first one place to another, as he looks out, and guess who he sees? Their eyes meet. Simon Peter and Jesus. He's looking pretty bad at this point. He's like beaten to a shred, and Simon knows this is not going to turn out well. And that just had to be amazingly hurtful for him. And that's when I can't take it anymore, he just races off. Okay? So this is what's going on with Simon. Now, let's cut away from this for just a minute, and let's look at John 14, 15, and 23. Both of them, if you have a newer translation, have the same thing. If you have a King James, you'll have to go to verse 23. Have we got love in there? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. So, I will tell you, then I'm going to tell you, not pay a whole lot of attention to what I'm telling you now. There are four words in the Greek language that get translated as love in our English translations. We generally deal with two of them because they're the most common. One of them isn't in the New Testament, eros, which is erotic love, which in marriage is perfectly fine. But in some context, the word for love that is used means that, even though it's not using that particular word. But there's eros, there's storge, which we find in Romans in Paul's denunciation of the threefold, God gave them over, God gave them over, God gave them over. And that is a word, and it gets translated, among other things, as natural affection. Because that's the kind of love you expect people to have. For instance, you expect people to love a good ruler. That just kind of naturally happens. You expect mamas to love their children, and children to love their mamas. Now, we know things happen that can intrude upon that. In fact, we've had a lot of things happen recently that expose the fact that some of that natural affection isn't around as much as it used to be. Because if you'd have gone back 100 years and talked to people, even in bad circumstances and situations, about getting rid of their babies before they were born, they would have said, well, no. But now, I read a quote by one particular person, and we need to be careful that we don't overreact and push them further away from us, because we've got things to say that they need to hear in the right way. And she said, I'm afraid now. Well, first of all, people lived a long time without abortion, and there are contraceptives, as I understand it. There are ways to prevent pregnancy if you have a little bit of intention to do so. You can even get them for free if you need to. So there's not a lot of cause for fear, even if you want to exercise some good judgment there. But it just goes to show that people get wrapped up in the narratives of culture, and they think the sky is falling when in fact it is not. But we will have opportunities potentially to have conversations with people that, if we can do it in the right way, we can show them some things and let them see that, first of all, that what they think Christianity is, it isn't. Because they got a horrible perspective of it, because people who claim to be Christians give them a horrible perspective of it. So we can do better than that. But that's another story for another time. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. Now, up here is where we're gonna kind of let that mitigate against this a little bit. I have combinations, John 3:35 with 5:20 and 11:5 with 11:36. In all four of those verses, the word love is used. But as I said, there are four different words. Eros and storgos eros isn't in there, storgos is used very rarely. But phileo, depending on which form you're looking at, phileo and agapao, agape and phileo, they're the ones that we're most accustomed with. Now, one of the things about it being accustomed to it, I remember I was in North Carolina many years ago, and we had a guy whose specialty was love, written a book on love, and he wrote a book about the differences between agabaho and phileo, as if they are always stark, and it's always talking about something different, one from the other. Well, these verses I've shown you here, John interchangeably uses agape and phileo when he's obviously meaning the same thing. In linguistics, well, it's not just in linguistics, but there's a thing called semantic range, which is, if you open up a dictionary and you look up a word and you see the definitions associated with it, that is its semantic range. In other words, it can mean something in those definitions. You got to go to the context, of course, because that determines meaning, to find out which of them you want to put into a particular place. Now, I'll do a little, I used to teach Greek. I'm not a Greek scholar, but I used to teach Greek, and I used to teach Hebrew. I'm certainly not a Hebrew scholar. But one of the things about that is oftentimes that's the collective we, get enamored with word studies. There are a couple things to think about when we think about word studies. if you say you do a word study on faith, well, look up in a Greek lexicon dictionary, faith, pisteuo, pistis. And you're going to have definitions just like you do in an English dictionary. So if I'm doing a word study and I want to confine faith to one particular thing, if you got a first year Greek book, you see the word in Greek for faith and you see right beside it one word. That's what you do, go down a list. You got vocabulary tests and all that kind of good stuff. When you get into second year Greek and beyond, you realize that was just a basic example of what the word generally speaking means. But there's all kind of other things that are associated with the word, depending on its context, that you need to learn also. I say that to say that word studies can be very tricky. We can give them too much weight. So we don't want to do that. So with this, we see that phileo and agapao have interchangeable usages. Now, if we were to take the semantic range, the places the words can go, let's imagine we've got a crowd in here that looks to me like you're old enough to know how to imagine. The rest of you, I'm sorry, but we're doing it anyway. Imagine two circles. One of them is phileo. The other one is agapao. You know what a Venn diagram is? Surely you do. It's where there's like circles and they have an overlap, and it's the part in here that you're really interested in. Okay. If we were to do that to agapao and phileo, we would find that you can move them toward each other and there'll be a part where they overlap. And that overlap is like, you can see it, can't you? Sure you can. It's right in here, and the bigger part's out here. Because the bigger part is you can interchange. So there's a distinctive part to that it's possible to use these words distinct from one another, even though it is also, and demonstrably so, you are able to use them interchangeably because they generally speaking mean the same thing. There's not a stark, phileo is brotherly love and agapao is the love of the mind and all that. Look at 1 Corinthians 13. Please. There's a big definition of love there, right? Guess which of the Greek words is being used there for love? If you took the strict definitions we've imposed on them, incorrectly so, that has a lot of warmth there, doesn't it? Relationship type warmth and how you deal with people, and you don't, you bear with them, and you don't keep a checklist on the stuff they do. So you say, there they go doing it again, and stuff like that. It's agapao. So there's a case where the definition is not a somewhat cold love of the mind that I'm going to do this no matter what. That is an aspect of what agapao can do, but it is not commonly what it does. You could have used phileo there and it would have worked just fine. There's no reason particularly why that went the way that it did. Okay? Now, any questions since we've talked Greek stuff and all of that? Okay, I'm not going to give you a microphone. Don't fear.
You're saying title, and then I've always heard this word agape.
Well, agapao, and it's just a different form. It's verb and noun stuff. Yeah, same thing.
Okay.
Yes, it's okay. Fun fact for the evening. Anything else? Okay. All right. Now here's the thing. Let's go to the conversation. The conversation. Matthew 21. And we're going to bring in stuff that we've been talking about. Jesus, this is one of his post-resurrection appearances before his ascension, obviously. And they're out fishing because, they know fishing. They feel comfortable with fishing. And they look over to the shore. And who's there? Jesus. What's he doing? He's going to, in fact, he's going to cook them some breakfast, and they're going to just eat it. What does Simon Peter do when he recognizes it's Jesus? Typical of Simon Peter. He's in the water, furiously swimming toward shore. And so then they have some breakfast. Now look at chapter 21 of John and verse 15. When they had what? Finished breakfast. Jesus said to Simon Peter, so he's roping him off. He's going to have this conversation with him. And he's picking up things that need to be picked up, that had been left in previous conversations and activities before this moment. And in fact, that had been left with things that happened before Jesus was crucified. Now he's back. And he had already told the apostles in 14, 15, 16 of John, and in other places too, that you're really not going to understand what all is going on here till I'm resurrected, and then we can talk again, and then you'll figure it out, which is essentially what's going on. And that would be true in a special way for Simon Peter. You're not going to understand everything about what I'm talking to you about before the resurrection like you will once I talk to you after the resurrection. So here we are, after the resurrection. He's going to have a chat with him. Now, how many times did he deny Jesus? How many times is Jesus going to ask him if he loves him? I don't think that's a coincidence. I think you did this 3 times. I'm going to give you a chance to do better. And he does, but we've got the 2 Greek words here in the conversation. Now, we have already seen that John himself will use the 2 words interchangeably, but that's pretty obvious when he does that. But here, those of you who have had poetry classes, here's what he's doing. He's going to use these 2 words. And first of all, he'll say to Simon Peter, do you agapao me? And Simon Peter will say, phileo you. And then he will say the second time, do you agapao me? And Simon Peter will say, phileo you. So you got A-B, A-B. Okay? The third time, it's A-A. Or excuse me, it's BB. All these letters. He says, the third time, Simon Peter gets upset because he said, do you phileo me? I don't think he's upset because he asked him a third time. I think he's upset because he asked him the third time, using this part of the semantic range that's different, talking about Simon Peter in a very closed conversation where he's using the words, and he's not using them like A-B, A-B, A-B. He's using them in an odd way and right there in a scrooched up place, and it fits the theology of what's going on for these to get to that part that's different between the 2 words. So I'm going to try to reconstruct this. Simon had said, I don't care if I have to die. There is nothing that will stop me from affirming that I'm your disciple. That would be the nth degree of agape love. It's the I don't care, I'm doing it anyway because my love is sufficient to where I would give my life. Did he? And he starts out to, but when he has to have a courage that doesn't let him have a sword in his hand, he doesn't have that kind of courage, does he? He cuts and runs. In the heat of the battle, he would have probably gone down fighting not too soon after long after he took out his sword. And I think he would have, been true to what he said he would do, except that that's not what Jesus wanted from him. Jesus was wanting a different kind of love. He was wanting a deeper kind of love from Simon Peter, and he doesn't have it yet. And he knew that. And Simon Peter didn't know that. What should he have done when Jesus said, you're going to deny me? Well, I wouldn't have thought that, but if you say so, right? I mean, that's what he did when Jesus asked him to put the fishing boat out after they fished all night and he hadn't caught any fish. And Jesus is a carpenter and he's a fisherman. And he tells it, go out. And he says, we've been out all night, but if you say so, we're going to go out. That's what he should have done then. Okay, man, I think I would, but if you say so, I guess I am. This is what we might call a reality check. We cannot personally be successfully dealt with, nor can we successfully deal with other people if they are not going to be where they really are, can we? We've all had conversations with people who are coming to us with a rhetoric that doesn't represent who they are and where they are, because they don't want to admit to who they are and where they are, and they want to have the conversation go another way. We can't do anything with that kind of a conversation. Neither can people do anything with us if they come to us and want to talk real to us, and we don't want to get real with them. And so we pretend we're something other than what we are because we don't want to deal with what we are. Maybe we don't understand who we are, like Simon Peter. He may not understand. But if Jesus is saying something, you need to try to figure it out. So, here's what I think's going on. And it has an application to us. Jesus isn't saying, Simon, back in the first part of this, you're not even my disciple because you won't die for me. When push comes to shove, you'll deny me. You're not even my disciple. He's not telling him he's not his disciple. He's telling him he's a disciple that has work to do. Guess what? That's always the case of any disciple. It's always the case of me and you. There are always things that are sort of above our current pay grade that we will not deal with as successfully as we might later on when we grow in our faith and in our love and in our devotion. Things that we wouldn't have thought about doing later on, we might do without thinking about it. Because it's a process. We talked about it this morning as our last scripture reading in the point of letting go and letting Jesus take over. That it's a process, and we use we use Paul in Philippians and how he would say after he's given up everything, counted it as rubbish, that he's not there yet. He's still reaching for the goal. In fact, he twice says that. I'm not there yet, and it's not that I'm there yet. It's not that I'm complete. Perfect is the translation, but complete would be a better translation. That I keep pressing on. And we also observed that when he could stop pressing on was when he was going to die, which he talks about in 2 Timothy, that he's fought the good fight. They're about to cut my head off, and it's over now. So, okay. But it's a process. So where we are in the process, if we are in the process, is okay. It doesn't mean it's okay to stay there, but we are where we are. And we find out, for instance, newborn babes. We find out that in many instances a new Christian would be like a newborn babe who needs the sincere milk of the Word. There's some people who would be converted who are already fairly spiritually strong. We were able to see elders being appointed in 1423 of Acts shortly after the church was started by Paul and his missionary journeys, because those people were steeped in Old Testament knowledge and maturity, and they were just a few steps away from being able to be an elder. But everybody wasn't like that. So I say this, when Jesus calls us and we legit become his disciples, and we have been baptized acceptably for the remission of our sins, where we are at that moment is not where we will go if we keep maturing, but it is okay to be there at that moment. It's not okay to stay there. What does the Hebrews writer say in Hebrews 5:12 through 14? When by reason of what? Time. You ought to be teachers. Not talking about teachers like James is talking about teachers. James is saying, don't many of you be teachers. He's talking about the professionals, so to speak, who make their living out of it. Hebrews writer is just talking about every Christian, their everyday responsibilities to be a teacher. He says, when by reason of time, you ought to be teachers. You have need again to be taught the elementary principles of the Word of God. Not needing meat, you again need milk. You need soft food. Because he lights out into a discussion with them about Melchizedek and the fact that Melchizedek's a type of Christ. Well, that's fairly heavy stuff. And I guess they're giving him the what? Look, And he says, you should, given the time that you've had. So God expects us to do something with the time that we've had. And we will all do that differently because we're all different. But he expects us to do something. The parable of the talents. The 5-talent man and the 2-talent man, or in Luke's case, 10 and 5, they both get essentially the same reward. Because they're only expected to do with their several abilities. And the 1-talent guy, the reason he didn't get anything was because he didn't do anything. He was only expected to do 1 talent or 1 mina, depending on which account, that God has given him, or the master has given him. So again, I go back. When you become a Christian, if it's legit, and you are now a disciple of Christ, wherever you are is okay. Whatever your capacity or potential is your capacity and potential. It may not be somebody else's. You may be a 1-talent person and somebody else may be a 5-talent person. That doesn't matter. God doesn't care, because he would deal with you based upon your, as the King James puts it, several abilities. Okay? So, back to our story. We can't stay where we are. We've got to progress. Now, Simon Peter has been chosen to be a what? What does he become? Starts with an A. Apostle. That's pretty big stuff, right? He's picked him to be one of the, in every list involving miraculous endowments and what have you in the New Testament, the top of the list is always apostles, because they have more responsibilities and they have more abilities. They can lay their hands on people and impart spiritual gifts, and they have responsibilities for getting the word out in its final form so that it can be there for everybody else for all time. So these folks have more responsibility than your average person. And Simon Peter is one of those folks. So, hence the conversation that he has with Simon when he says, the devil wanted to take you and sift you like wheat. But I have intervened, and when you turn, when you get past this, take care of your brethren. We're going to get that in just a minute. In fact, we're going to get it pretty much right now. So the first time, after breakfast, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, Bar-Jonah, do you agapao me? And Simon Peter says, I phileo you. What does Jesus say after Simon Peter says that? He tells him to do something. What does he tell him to do? Got some lamb sheep stuff coming up where he's going to have responsibility for Jesus' flock. Okay? Second time. Do you agapao me? I phileo you. Another admonition to take care of his people. He's the good shepherd. Third time. And it tells us that because he asked him the third time, and I don't think that means, in fact, I think there's some Greek stuff there that would show you otherwise. I don't think it means that, oh, you asked me 3 times. No, but that you asked me the third time, do you phileo me? And he said, yes, Lord, you know everything. You know I phileo you. And he did. He knew that back in the first conversation before all this happened, before he denied him. He's basically saying, you phileo me. You don't agape me yet, and so you're going to deny me. And he, no. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll kill them all. I'll do what these other folks won't do. I am there. I can't be any better in my tightness with you. And Jesus said, no, that's not really true. So, what Jesus has done here is what I think he wants to do with all of us. He wants to deal with us if we will be straight with him, if we'll be honest with him, if we won't profess to be something we're not, if we're willing to grow and see our need to grow. Now, as we go through this, we're going to see that Simon Peter isn't where he's going to be. What does Jesus tell him that has to do with his future? He tells him something. What does he tell him? When you were young, what? It's okay to look. You pretty much did whatever you wanted to. Isn't that kind of like Simon Peter? He's that kind of a guy, right? But, he says, when you're older, people are going to take you where you don't want to go, indicating the manner that he was going to die. He put himself in his position as a gospel preacher. You see this in Acts when they tell him to stop preaching, and he says, we got to preach. Now, that's not the Simon Peter that's running off somewhere, is it? That's the Simon Peter who says, you can tell me to stop, but should we obey God rather than men rather than God? And I don't think so. Eventually, that caught up to him in Rome, and they cut his head off. They cut Paul's head off. They crucified him. They crucified him. And he didn't try to hide or anything like that. And he's not like, please crucify me. I mean, Jesus didn't want to be crucified in a sense. But Peter's going to let himself have the consequences of his allegiance to Jesus hold out. It's not his favorite thing in the world, but he's going to let those people get him. He's going to put himself in a place where they're going to get him. And he's going to be crucified. Tradition says he was crucified upside down because he told him, I'm not worthy to be crucified like Jesus. Turn me upside down and crucify me, which may actually have been the case. That's a bit of a change in Simon Peter, isn't it? And so, one thing about this, though, Simon Peter's still Simon Peter. I mean, he always is. He gets rebuked by Paul later on, but he's growing. He's getting past these things. John, the beloved disciple, is in proximity. And Simon, being Simon, what about him? We like to tend to other people's business, don't we? And Jesus says something that John has to explain in the inspired text. He says, if I want him to stay until I come back, it's none of your business. Now, he didn't say he's going to stay alive until I come back. And so John has to say, he didn't say that. He said, if. Which was his way of telling Simon Peter, you got enough business to take care of with yourself. You don't need to be worried about John. And he was absolutely right. As this conversation points out, we got work to do, Simon, and you need to be looking at you instead of everybody else. Because all of us always have something more to do. That doesn't mean that there aren't times when we can help people, when we take the log out of our eye to get the speck out of their eye, and we can be encouragement to them, we can help bear their burdens, all that. That's a different thing. But nosiness and busybodiness, we don't have time for that. We need to be using that time for personal instruction from Jesus through the Word to take care of our situations. So, we've looked at some things. We've looked at I won't deny you. Yeah, you will. You'll do it 3 times. Does it 3 times. So he says, Simon Peter, do you love me more than these? See that? It's just a neuter. And people speculate the fishing stuff or whatever. I don't think it. I think theologically, and as we put everything together, you said you love me more than these other guys. We're sitting eating breakfast with these other guys. Do you love me more than these guys? Did he? No, they all ran, didn't they? Again, Jesus can do really amazing things with us when we will be real with him and honest with him. One of my favorite scenes, and what was the equivalent of The Chosen back in the day when I was young, was a miniseries. He used to have miniseries all the time on TV. Jesus of Nazareth. It was not as good as The Chosen. But one of my favorite scenes in that, it has to do with Simon Peter. And any of you who knew who James Ferrantino was, James Ferrantino was Simon Peter. And he says, I'm going to go to Matthew Levi's house because he's invited me over there because he's going to be one of us now and he's going to put a dinner on for us. I'm not going to go to that guy's house. You're not going to find me going to that house. No, I'm not going to do it. And then they're there and they got all these shady characters there and Jesus eating and talking to them about the kingdom. And Simon kind of peeks around the corner, you know. And Jesus catches his eye and he kind of comes out and he says, I'm a stupid man, Lord. Sometimes we just need to fess up. Sometimes we're just stupid. Jesus already knows it, so it's okay to let him know that we know it too. And then he can work with us. Okay. Thank you very much.